today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about the connection between where your eyes are, what you're watching, and your level of dissatisfaction with your marriage and your life. When social media becomes a third party in your relationship, you have a breach of trust. And the problem with social media is it wants to dictate to us. It wants to tell us what's important. It wants to tell us what a happy marriage looks like. That is a net loss way to view things. So just get that will never work. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. And I'm your host, Rich Heller. And today we're talking about, does your marriage stack up? Hey, we're all unconsciously competing with a relationship that isn't even real, but worse than that, we're competing on the wrong ground a lot of the time. And let's talk about what that means. We've been exploring our relationship with screens, how we can use screens so far, the negative uses of screens and how they get in the way of having intimacy and closeness in our marriage. The thing that we signed up for when we were in love, when we got married, we signed up for a partnership that was loving, gentle, kind, intimate, compassionate, where we built each other up. We've been talking about how screens might maybe be interrupting with that just a little bit or maybe a lot. You see a post, someone you know is celebrating their anniversary with an elaborate romantic getaway, a trip to Aruba at the best resort, and they're surrounded by friends and family. They're riding off on their speedboat. Maybe they're parasailing. Maybe they flew there on a private jet. And meanwhile, they're posting this the whole time. And you and your partner, you're barely communicating even by text. You text and you get triggered. What you do is you go off and watch your own shows. You hardly spend time together. You look at this post on social media and compare it to what's going on with you, and there is instant dissatisfaction. You may not be thinking it consciously, but somewhere in the subconscious or unconscious realm, there's a grind going on. Maybe you look at this post and you feel dissatisfaction and you go in and say, didn't you notice I did the laundry? Gwen, why don't you acknowledge all the things that I do for you? Hey, how come we can't go someplace special together? Or maybe she says, if you're working all the time, how come we never have money? Because she's been watching those posts. The truth is that, I want to just pause here. All right. This isn't just about comparison. It isn't just about look at how they're living and why don't we have it and what it brings up. It's also about what people are posting and what draws eyes on social media. All right. So I want you to get it isn't just about feeling dissatisfied. Does my marriage stack up to theirs? It's also about how are we measuring our marriage? Because if you are measuring your marriage against having an all-out private jet to Aruba with your own boat and a catered chef and da-da-da-da-da, if that's what you think marriage should be about, then what you've allowed to happen here is you've allowed social media to dictate to you what's important about life. No, I want to be really clear. I like me a private jet as much as anyone else. Ain't nothing wrong with Aruba. Had a chef cater a meal for my wife and some friends the other night. It was awesome, right? That's all good stuff, but that's not what's important. That is the gravy of life. Let's talk about what's really important. So not only do we find ourselves unconsciously measuring our relationship against theirs, but we're also measuring the wrong things. I really want to get that across to you. Social media highlights curated reality rather than real life. You know, it's really interesting to me. I post on social media all the time to promote the work that I do with couples. But part of what I promote is just about me. And it's really interesting to me that when I post me on somebody's yacht, that gets a lot more eyes than when I post the pergola that I built by hand, right? People look at that and they go, oh, so he's a guy who makes stuff. Big deal. But when they see him on a yacht, oh, now, honestly, when I go to social media, I'm more interested in people building stuff because that's what I do and I like to see how they do it. The question is, are we allowing social media to dictate the standards to us, or are we using social media to get what we want and need to have our life work? That is the question. And the problem with social media is it wants to dictate to us. It wants to tell us what's important. It wants to tell us what a happy marriage looks like. Not only that, but the things that people post, you already know they're not showing their dirty underwear. And when they do, it's really rare. Basically, we slip into a relationship performance trap, but it's a double-edged sword. It isn't just the trap of everything's good with them and everything's bad with me, comparing our insides to their outsides. It isn't just that. It's that we get stuck on the outside. If I only had a bigger house, a better car, a suit, a nicer vacation, a prettier wife, a more handsome husband, a younger wife, a more productive husband, whatever it is you're dreaming of, if I only had those things, then it would all be better. We get jammed up on a couple of rails here. And I can't emphasize to you how incredibly destructive this is of us personally. Forget the marriage. Personally, when we have our eyes focused on things that are ethereal, that are surface, instead of what's really important. And what's really important, my friends, is having a sense of purpose. What's really important is being willing to sacrifice to grow in that sense of purpose. What's really important is supporting your partner in their sense of purpose. A happy marriage is not just made up of private jets. It might not even be made up of private jets, if we're honest. It's made up of, do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel like I've been developing and growing? Does my partner feel like she's fulfilled, he's fulfilled, developing and growing? Together, are we producing a relationship that supports one another and that emphasizes the kind of change we want to generate on the planet? And are our children going to have a better place when we leave than what we came in to ourselves? Social media hardly touches on that stuff, but it's highly addictive. It drives dissatisfaction. It drives jealousy and insecurity. Without realizing it, social media plants seeds of doubt, making couples question their happiness, unless you're super clear about your values and principles. A ton of the work that we do with couples here is helping them getting down to those values and principles and getting clear about what's really important. It might be nice to have a private jet, but that isn't what's really important. A private jet might help us to have what's really important, but the jet itself is not what's important. Partners may wonder, why don't we have what they have? We start to withdraw emotionally as we look more and more at, why don't we have what they have? Why don't I have the kind of life they have? Why don't I feel free? Why am I missing out on this life? What am I doing in this marriage that's driving this? Let's talk about Brad and Gwen, my favorite couple. Brad notices that Gwen is distant and sees that she's what? Scrolling away on social media. And he asks her, what's wrong? And she says nothing. But secretly, she wonders why their relationship isn't as romantic as the one she sees online. Why doesn't Brad take Gwen off to Aruba in a private jet, just the two of them, with their dog Spot? When social media becomes a third party in your relationship, you have a breach of trust. When social media becomes a bigger part of your day than your partner, what is going on really? Well, we talked about in those past episodes that sometimes we seek self-gratification and escape through screens in 110 different ways. I'm not going to go over them again. Go back to those past episodes. But the signs, as we've talked about before, are that you're on that screen more than anything else as a percentage of time. You're on that first thing in the morning, like you get up in the morning to have coffee, you're on your screen instead of connecting with your partner. By the way, some people, when they get up first thing in the morning, are on their knees. Some people, when they get up first thing in the morning, are reviewing their goals. Some people, when they get up first thing in the morning, are having a conversation with their partner about how are we going to manage this day? What time should we eat dinner? When are we going to get some time together? But if what you're doing is going through your email and your texts, you have become a victim of the checklist mindset, the dopamine hit you get from getting things done. And you're probably doing that all day long, all the time, even on Sundays or Saturdays, which maybe should have been a day of rest for you. Maybe you may actually be engaging in digital conversations more than real face-to-face ones. Huge risk there because so much is missing. Then you think a digital conversation is fulfilling, but a digital conversation with a real person is about as real versus having face-to-face time with that person as having a digital conversation with an AI versus having a digital conversation with a real person. And if you can't see the difference, you've been on screens way too long. Brad and Gwen realize that they are arguing all the time about time spent online, and neither of them really wants to admit how much time they're spending. They're busy finger pointing. How much is that you pointing the finger a lot and not actually looking at your own usage? Brad and Gwen realize that they have a constant experience of not enough in the face of what they're watching on social media, the vacations people are taking, the clothes they're wearing, the kinds of parties they're having, the kinds of weekends they say that they're spending all the time. Nobody can possibly be living life that way. Well, they can possibly, but if they are, where's the important part? Where's the thing that makes life juicy? The sense that I am the perfect key made to unlock the perfect lock. That no one else can do this but me. No one else can make this difference but me. I'm going to tell you, right? 7 years ago, I prostrated myself on the floor, and when I came back up, I changed my whole life. I prostrated myself on the floor because I was fascinated with managing my business and making money. I had a beautiful house. I had a beautiful car, a beautiful wife. I still have that house. I still have that wife. We changed a few cars, but I was miserable. And I refocused my life on what's important, and everything has changed. And actually, I had never flown on a private jet until after I did that, interestingly, but it didn't mean anything to me. And I have friends today who are very successful in worldly terms, but that's not why we're friends. They and I seek each other out because we have things to learn and grow from one another. When your focus is on growth, fulfillment, and satisfaction, the other stuff falls into the place if it's necessary and needed, but it isn't what's important. So here's some key steps. I want you to acknowledge that comparison is a game you will never win, particularly when we're comparing our insides to other people's outsides. When we're comparing how empty we feel, or how not enough we feel, or how all the things that aren't working, or how we're not reaching our goals, to all the ways that they're living, that they're posting that are so amazing, that is a net loss way to view things. So just get that will never work. Number 2, start cutting back on that social media exposure. And when you do watch it, be very mindful. You want to be mindful of what you're feeling, right? You can't control or manage your unconscious mind, but you can have a sense of what it's feeling. And if you're looking at someone's post about Aruba and jets and planes and all that good stuff I was talking about, and you're going, oh, just notice it and ask yourself, where's that coming from? Is it that I yearn to live on an island because I need to have a relationship with the sea? Or is it that I'm glazed from looking at the life of glamour? And if you're glazed, it's time to shut that sucker off. Limit your exposure, especially in times of vulnerability, because that's when we are most likely to compare our insides. Vulnerability, actually, that's not the right word, especially in times of when you're in what we call here catabolic emotions, sadness, hurt, fear, loss, maybe a little anger, because that's when we're most likely to have that, compare that negativity to the positivity that we see. There's better ways to process those feelings. We can talk about it. Prioritize real experiences over curated ones. Get that in-person experiences are more important. If you're not getting out of the house, maybe you need to join a networking group or a book club or call an old friend. Or maybe you and your partner need to go out with another couple or something. Maybe you need to spend more time with your parents, her parents, his parents, whatever. Maybe you need to hang out with your kids' parents from school, and start building real relationships. Just get that getting out and being with real people is important. Even you can have them over. Brad and Gwen, they agreed to have phone-free time each night. They agreed to start having once a month dinners with other couples. They have agreed to limit their social media time. They have agreed to have regular conversations about how am I doing with my sense of personal fulfillment and personal mission. How's that class you're taking going? How's that new job? What's good about it? What's bad about it? What's fulfilling? What's not so fulfilling? How can we change that? Social media distorts reality, but screens do something else too. They expose us to intense emotional content every day. How does this constant flood of negativity affect our ability to love and connect? I want you to really think about that. One of the problems that Brad and Gwen had was when they did spend time together, they were on guard. When they did spend time together, they had trouble being empathetic and compassionate. When they were in love, they were like walking in each other's shoes. But years of marriage and escape into screens had led to a state of constant numbness and a fear. The fear that if they let their guard down, if they actually allowed themselves to feel what the other person was feeling and have some empathy and compassion for them, that they might become vulnerable and get hurt. They had been attacking each other over their lack of connection for so long that the actual complaining about the lack of connection was causing greater lack of connection. And then they would go look on social media and see how Snoop Dogg was doing or whoever. I obviously don't do a lot of social media. Actually, truthfully, I don't do any. I post, but I don't look much. They would look and go, why isn't my life like that? Is that you? Maybe it's time to change. Go to our website, richinrelationship.com. RICHINRELATIONSHIP.com, richinrelationship.com. There's tons of resources there, all kinds of opportunities to start to build a community around yourself of real people, virtually and maybe even in person, where you can start to unplug and reconnect. Thank you for tuning in. Next, we're going to talk about compassion fatigue, how to learn to get back in touch with our feelings, and we're going to begin to look at how to use screens to help us with that. In the meantime, have a wonderful day and an awesome tomorrow.